I have been wanting to take a break from social media for quite a while, and I've been kind of debating it because it's it's a big part of my life these days. Like this whole podcast is kind of driven by social media. The whole kind of connection I have with this audience is driven by social media. The way we connect is through social media. But I am becoming too much of a consumer rather than a creator. I'm going to be really honest with you, right? It all started on tour. Like on tour, I never really used TikTok before, and someone told me you should go and check out some of the videos on TikTok of the tour. So I would come off stage and go back to my room, play Spider Man for a bit, sit in my bed and scrolling through busted videos on TikTok, and it became a lot. I was doing it for like an hour a night. And since then, we've done quite a few kind of cool things, and I've been really checking the responses on Instagram and all kind of social media, and even back on Twitter, all these kind of things. I'm really kind of staying connected with people on it, but I'm consuming a lot of social media, right? And it's not positive. Like I feel dirty. Sometimes I can be scrolling videos for hours and hours and hours. And when you're on a tour bus in your bunk and you've got your headphones on, I realize I spent an hour and 40 minutes scrolling videos. And it's not, helpful stuff anymore. Like, it's not like I'm watching videos of Busted going, oh, that could be better, which I was doing at the beginning. I'm just watching bullshit, for hours and hours. And like, it's a lot of my week. So I have been reading loads about social media, getting loads of information about it, and I'm going to take another little break. And we're going to talk about that because I'm going to encourage you to too. If I do it, everyone does it. So I'm going to encourage us all to have a little bit of a social media break. How do you feel about that? Does it make you feel uncomfortable as hell? Yes, it does. It does make you feel uncomfortable. You already feel uneasy, the fact that you won't have it in your pocket, don't you? Me and Emma are going to be doing it, and we're going to actually have a burner phone. So we're going to have a separate phone for a little while, for a number of days, and we're just going to have a phone with texts and calls on it, for a period of time, and we're going to track it. We're going to see how it makes us feel. The last time I did this, last time I took a social media break, um, I found it really strange in the beginning. I had phantom buzzes. Do you ever get that? When your pocket buzzes and you check it and there's nothing there, you're like, but I felt it buzz in my pocket. Because you're anticipating that buzz, that kind of like connection, that that kind of like reward, and it kind of tricks you into checking it, and then before you know it, you're in a rabbit hole again. So I found that really, really massive. And the urge to scroll was huge. I've talked about this before, but boredom is a really important thing. And I am my most creative when I'm bored. I am. They say that you come up with the best ideas in the shower, and that's the reason, because it's the only time of the day you don't have your phone. Now we go to the toilet. Do you know what? I filmed this podcast um, at a place in Spotify, right? And there was a sign once on the toilet that I read that said, "Please don't use your phone in the toilet." Right? I was like, "That's a weird thing," but apparently the queues for the lavatory was so huge because people were sitting down to take a piss and just scrolling for ages that the queues for the toilet were getting huge. Which I found fascinating, right? And was it here? Or was it somewhere else? I just put words in Spotify's mouth. Sorry if that wasn't you, but it was somewhere I went to, and I was like, that is fascinating, because like the queues, especially in women's toilets, are so busy now because people are sitting down for a wee and they're just on social media. So people are taking much more longer toilet breaks, which is adding to less work and blah 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 blah. But also just the queues for toilet is outrageous. So I do that. I sit down for a wee a lot of time now, and I sit and I scroll. How weird's that, mate? So I'm going to be stopping that. I'm going to be taking a little break. Um, I really noticed something happening recently in the studio with Busted. We're writing a new album, and normally when you kind of get somewhere with a song, sometimes it's a bit of a slog. You kind of got to work for a problem, or kind of work for an area where you don't know what to do. And normally we kind of bash through ideas and kind of keep coming up with something. And there's no stupid ideas. Everything's kind of valid, and kind of like we try loads of stuff out, right? Recently, it comes to a point and we're like, and suddenly the phones come out, and this is a problem as well with writing lyrics on your phone. because if you're writing lyrics on your phone, you're doing lyrics, you can be actually scrolling and not really doing anything, which I noticed my band members are doing, and me, and we're not actually contributing at all. We're just scrolling. It stops creativity, and the flow of the song just dies. And that's because we bring our phones in the studio. So I'm going to be trying to enforce a no phone rule in the studio, which is going to go down like a sack of shit. But I'm going to try that as well. So I asked you guys to come up with some questions for me about social media, and boy, did you turn out in force. There were so many questions in such a short time. Like, we checked them after the first day, and there was hundreds of questions. So thank you so much for getting involved. This has obviously provoked a response in people. People have questions about this. So I wrote some down, not all of them because it was hundreds. But I've wrote down 10, and we're going to get through them now. And by the way, these are just my opinions, right? This isn't like, I'm not a neuroscientist. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm also not a social media expert. I'm as much of a dickhead with it as you guys are. So I'm sorry if my point of view isn't valid, or if I say some things which you disagree with, but that's okay, because that's life. Right. Okay. So first question, number one, do you think that social media impacted your addiction and recovery? Right. Do I think it impacted my addiction? Well, to be honest, most of the time when I was in active addiction, I didn't have social media. My last relapse, I had social media, but I didn't really go on it. I just, used uncontrollably, pacing around a room, listening to music. It was a really horrible time, and making terrible music in the studio. Oh, thinking about it makes me feel really sad. But that lasted about 4 months as well, which is horrendous. But I wasn't really active on social media. If anything, I hid from it, because I didn't want people to see me. I wanted to be disconnected with everybody and everything, and just connected to that substance. All it did was trap me in a cycle of using. So I don't think it really played into my addiction. Has it played into my recovery? Massively. This is the thing. I've found incredible people on social media because I've searched people within addiction and people within the recovery space, and found incredible insights into people because of social media. YouTube especially, I've kind of tracked people down. I found other podcasts on different podcast apps about through social media, about addiction and different forms of recovery, and I find that fascinating. So it has impacted my recovery, and I've taken some things away from that, from all these people that I listen to. I take something away from everyone, so it has impacted my recovery massively. And I think that's a good thing about social media. So you can find, somebody that's into what you want to talk about, or that's talking about something you're into, so I think that is a really good part of social media. Question number 2. Do you think there should be an age limit to social media? Do I think there should be an age limit to social media? Yes, I do. I don't want to answer that, but yes, I do. I do think there should be an age limit. I think I'm listening to this book by Jonathan Haidt right now called Anxious Generation. He says no social media before 16. I think that's probably a really wise decision. We've made that rule in our house with our kids, but, my eldest has Snapchat, and I've seen what happens with that. It's one of those things that's kind of opening Pandora's box. Too late to kind of shut it, but I think that's the only social media she has, and she's not on anything else. But that's a rule that we're going to keep with our kids. There's no social media till 16, I think. And I'm seeing the science on that, and it kind of seems to point to that being a good idea. But everybody's different. And everyone parents their kids differently. And people are able to make their own decisions, and that's what's beautiful about life. Number 3, as a teacher, I can see how much it affects our kids. What can we do to protect them? I think knowledge is power, right, with everything. I think the more we can talk about this, the more we can have an open communication with our kids about why, about why this is the way it is, and why we think the way we think about stuff is important, and mistakes that we've made, right? It's because, we can all go, you shouldn't do this, in the same time we're doing it, which doesn't work, so we shouldn't do this because this is what happens, and that's true for us, and that's true for me, so I think, talking to them about why, and also finding out other resources, there's so many people talking about this right now. I watched a documentary years ago called The Social Dilemma on Netflix, and it was so brilliant. This was a few years back, people were really talking about this, about the effect it has. and how addictive this is, and this was years and years ago, so right now there is loads of people out there talking about it. It's a really hot topic. So I think maybe showing your kids these things, maybe talking to about them, would be a good idea. Question number 4. What's the best / worst bits of social media? Okay, well, the best things for me, I think, is finding things that make me laugh. Like I follow a few people on social media that really make me belly laugh. There's this one guy, God, I can't remember his name, but Charlie showed him to me from the band, and he's talking about this egg salad taco thing. What is this? And it's so funny. Like, I've watched it 100 times. I've watched it so many times. And he's got another video about this little book that turns into a house. And oh my God, it's so bloody funny that I've laughed for hours about this one video. And I love that. I love these kind of things. Like, it really make me laugh. I also send memes to my wife. Who knew that memes would be our new love language? But I send her memes all the time, and she sends me them back. She sends me really sweet ones, and I send her videos of like women getting angry at men grabbing their bum the whole time. But I do love that. I do love these funny little things I find on social media. What are the worst bits of social media? I think there's loads of it. I think there's I think one of the worst things is people getting abuse on social media. That can be really damaging. It can be really hurtful for people. It can ruin people's lives. Like before, we would go to school. You'd do something silly. People at school would know about it. You get to go home. Now you can take that home with you in your pocket. Like online bullying is massive in schools, and I think that's really, that's killing people. So that's obviously bad. I think hate speech, is so visceral on social media. Like, I see it all the time. So much kind of like complete and utter like vile things that people say on social media that are just there. And if you don't know what that is, you can absorb that, and it can become your viewpoint, which I think is really damaging. So I think we have to know that there are good people out there and there are bad people out there, and on social media there are good people and there are lots of bad people. So we have to kind of take that into mind. Question number 5: would you say it's an addiction? I talked to Dr. Rongan Chatterjee about this, and he calls them low-grade addictions. These kind of like low-grade addictions that we have. They're not, it's not the same as, being on social media is maybe not seen as damaging as, smoking crack, but it is an addiction. You take it away, you feel withdrawal. It can affect your mind, it can affect your state of being. It can affect all these things, and you are physically addicted to it sometimes. Like I am. I find myself, when I'm bored, scrolling. I don't want to look at it, but I can't help it. And sometimes I find myself in the middle of it. I'm like, what am I doing? What am I doing? I didn't mean to do that. So I think it is absolutely an addiction, and I think it should be treated as such. I think it's becoming more and more prevalent in every walk of life. So I think we really need to look at this right now, because it's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. It's only becoming more and more entrenched in our lives and our day-to-day life. So I think it is definitely an addiction. Number 6: how do you navigate social media with your kids? I think I've just covered this a little bit. We say no social media till we're 16. In our house. And also, whenever I catch them watching YouTube or whatever, I'm very intrigued into what they're watching. I'm very intrigued into what they're consuming. My son calls some things brain rot. Like I think that's a good term. I think that's a really good term. What are you watching brain rot for? I think that's the thing, right? Our diet is everything now. It's what we put in our body. It's what we consume, and our social media is a massive part of our diet these days. And it's what generates thoughts in our minds. Sometimes, we can see something, we can watch something that will then, therefore, make us feel the way we feel about a certain subject. And I don't want that. I don't want to be I suppose every bit of knowledge kind of informs us on one thing or another. But when you take someone's point of view and that's your point of view because you've seen it on social media, you've really got to look into it before you kind of before it can be warranted as a fact. Whereas social media, lots of people out there spouting facts, and they're not facts. So I think there has to be really careful with that. And I talk to my kids about that stuff all the time. So we try to really carefully navigate that. We keep our kids off of social media. We don't put their faces on social media because we've always just never done that. And I feel like I don't know. At the beginning, I was like, I don't want people to know who my kids are. Because I want them to live a life just being kids. I don't want them to be people to know that there are kids. I want them to just be able to live their life as kids. And maybe if you put them on social media, it might inform some other people's opinion of them, and I don't want them having to deal with that. I've dealt with that quite a lot in my life, people kind of forming opinions of me about things that were written about me, and it wasn't me, and I don't want my kids to ever experience that. I mean, they will do. There will come a point when they'll be out in the big wide world on their own, but at the moment I have some kind of some way of forming a safety net in some way around them until the big wide world swallows them up.